to a new vlog. In this vlog, we are going to be focusing on reading my book club pick of the month. So if you're in my book club, hi. If you're not, my favorite link is only in the descriptions of my video. Sorry, I haven't had a lot of caffeine, and I do want to say a disclaimer. So if you watched last week's vlog, I had an allergic reaction, and I am like on 3 different kinds of medications at the moment, and I will be for the rest of the vlog, except for like I'm gonna be on medications for the majority of this vlog. I don't know how much of an impact it's going to have on my reading. We'll just have to see where it goes. But the first book is The Metamorphosis and Other Stories by Franz Kafka. I am basically halfway through The Metamorphosis, and it's giving Tim Burton vibes. There are so many Burtons because of NASCAR that I don't want to say a NASCAR driver rather than the movie guy. Next is our main feature, and that is The 5 People You Meet in Heaven by Mitch Albom. So I am going to read the full description here, which it is on the lengthier side. In this book, from the author, the phenomenal international bestseller Tuesdays with Morrie comes the instant New York Times #1 bestseller, an enchanting, beautifully written novel about heaven and earth that has already touched millions around the world. Eddie is a grizzled war veteran who feels trapped in the toil of his father before him, fixing rides at a seaside amusement park. As the park has changed over the years, from the loop-the-loop to the pipeline plunge, so too has Eddie changed from optimistic youth to embittered old age. His days are a dual routine of work, loneliness, and regret. Then on his 83rd birthday, Eddie dies in a tragic accident, trying to save a little girl from a falling cart. With his final breath, he feels 2 small hands in his, and then nothing. He awakens in the afterlife, where he learns that heaven is not a lush Garden of Eden, but a place where your earthly life is explained to you by 5 people who were in it. These people may have been loved ones or distant strangers, yet each of them changed your path forever. So I'm wondering, are these people who have already passed? We'll have to see. One by one, Eddie's 5 people illuminate the unseen connections of his earthly life. As the story builds to a stunning conclusion, Eddie desperately seeks redemption in the still unknown last act of his life. Was it a heroic success or a devastating failure? The answer, which comes from the most unlikely of sources, is as magical and inspirational as a glimpse of heaven itself. In The 5 People You Meet in Heaven, his first novel, Mitch Albom gives us an astoundingly original story that will change everything you've ever thought about the afterlife and the meaning of our lives here on Earth. Already embraced as an international bestseller, find out why this timeless tale is treasured by readers of fine fiction and fans of Tuesdays with Morrie around the world. As author Amy Tan says, this book is a gift to the soul. I don't know why I'm getting similar vibes to Remarkably Bright Creatures. I think because it's an elderly character, and that is the book we read last year for our contemporary pick in the book club. So this is the one we're reading this year. Next, I might finish both of these books today. First, we have Burr by Gore Vidal. This is basically a Evelyn Hugo, but make it Aaron Burr. We have Burr, who is telling his life story to Charlie, who is writing this book about Burr because they don't want Martin Van Buren to become president. And how does that have any connection? A lot of people at the time, and even people today, think that Martin Van Buren was the bastard son of Aaron Burr. Aaron Burr is a villain in American history, so obviously they don't want a villain to have the White House. That's like a very loose description. Lastly, we have The Lily and the Lion. Again, might finish today, and that's by Maurice Drouin. This is a French modern classic about the fall of the Capetian dynasty, and those are the books that I am focusing on reading this week. Let's talk about the book. I read 77 pages, which got me to 39%, so a little over a third of the way into The 5 People You Meet in Heaven. We're going to go through my notes, but my first tab is literally the dedication page. We love when the dedications get to me. Sometimes they're just very blunt, sometimes they're emotional. It says, everybody has an idea of heaven, as do most religions, and they should all be respected. I agree with that 100%. The version represented here is only a guess, a wish in some ways, that my uncle and others like him, people who felt unimportant here on earth, realized finally how much they mattered and how much they were loved. And that is something that I'm always preaching to y'all, that every little thing on this planet, every little action, breath, whatever, it all matters. People are just like, yeah, whatever, but they're missing something. I don't know what, but this is a very spiritual book. But I definitely do agree with this, that every little thing matters, and hopefully this book has changed a lot of people's lives. But we start out with the like freak accident of how Eddie dies, and we are seeing it from like an hour before, just going by, you know, every 10 minutes or so until his death. And we have him just sitting there really reminiscent about his life, and it's like something in his subconscious knows that death is coming for him. And I wonder if that actually does play out in the real world. I mean, I don't want to say I doubt it, because I feel like it might. The subconscious is a crazy thing that I'm always wanting to know more about. His writing style is definitely still very fast paced, a little too fast for my liking, where I'm like, oh my gosh, I hope I'm getting everything. But I felt the same way about my favorite book that I read last month, The Woman in Me by Britney Spears, where I was like, oh my gosh, just boom, 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 boom. I hope I am picking up all the information that I need to, and I ended up loving that book. And with his last book that I read by him, I did give like, I think I gave it a 4.75, but honestly, I would probably dock that down to like a 4.5. But we will have to see where this book goes, because right now it's fine, like 3-star vibes. It's not doing anything too crazy for me, just somewhere like in a 3.25, 3.5 kind of way. I'm also getting slight Kate Atkinson vibes. Now, this book was published in 2003, to give y'all a publication date. But why am I getting Kate Atkinson vibes? No, it is taking place like in the last century. Eddie was born in the 1920s. And we are just seeing several of his birthdays throughout his life, and it's really reminding me of Life After Life, or A God in Ruins, where we are seeing flashbacks of these people's lives and significant events that make the life. So the theme is kind of similar, of these things that seem minuscule in the long scheme of things really did something crazy to change your life in the long run, even if you don't realize it till the very end. Now, on page 32, we have kind of the name of the book mentioned. It is the first person Eddie meets in heaven, so not literally the title, but we're getting pretty close. And as I was saying, how this book is spiritual, Emily Bledsoe Holloway, she needs to read this book. I think she would like it a lot, because just the people we meet in heaven, like, I think it's a book she would like. So if you like her TikToks, you might want to check out this book. And this one, we are having one of the people he meets in heaven talks about how funerals and how birth brings people together. And it's like, why do people feel like they have to attend a funeral? Why do they feel like they have to go see the newborn baby? Quote, "It is because the human spirit knows deep down that all lives intersect, that death doesn't just take someone, it misses someone else. And in the small distance between being taken and being missed, lives are changed." Like, Mitch Albom, he understands life and spirituality, and I love to see when other people have the same beliefs as me. I do love to read books about people who are on completely different paths than me as well, but when you just feel so seen and represented, knowing like, yes, I'm solidified in my beliefs, it feels so good. Let me tell you, representation is important, even though this isn't like straight up representation, but it's my beliefs on page. And last note is, so each person he meets is in heaven, and there's just a lot of different atmospheres in heaven, I guess, because I don't want to get too spoilery, and I'm like, who is seeing this as heaven? It is a really like a lifeless terrain. He's surrounded by fallen trees and blackened rubble, a busted wagon and rotting bones of an animal, hot wind, the sky is a flaming yellow. Like, whose heaven is that? Who is, like, I'm concerned for that person and what life they might have lived. But those are my thoughts so far in The 5 People You Meet in Heaven by It is Tuesday, and I have gotten to over the 25% mark in my friend's Kafka book. I read the Metamorphosis, and honestly, like, it's not as intimidating as I thought it was going to be. Now, it wasn't the best thing I've ever read, but I do think it's something that, as I always say, a lot of people will find relatability in, because we have this guy, Gregor, who he turns into like a giant, I picture like a cockroach, but in different translations, sometimes it will say vermin, which vermin are like mice and rats. Some say bug, so it just depends on the translation that you have. So I was picturing like a huge bug. Obviously, that's going to freak out the people he's living with, but guess is how you say her name. She is the daughter of the house and is still like an empathetic, sympathetic person, taking care of him, giving him food still, even though he doesn't really want that. But I think you can really fill in the blanks with this kind of story of just if you're a little bit different, of how people aren't always going to accept who you are. That's just how the world works. Sadly, we're not perfect. It was really picturing like depression, but I do think you can be like, just if you are different in some kind of way, and also see it being like a physical sickness, that can really cause a divide in a family because they're in denial or just different kinds of things like that. So I do think it's just about being an outcast and how outcasts are treated. I talked about yesterday, it really reminds me of Tim Burton, like Edward Scissorhands. I really get that same kind of vibe. So I think if you like Tim Burton movies, you should give the Metamorphosis a go. I know it's one of those pieces of work where it's just like, oh my gosh, this is very scary. It's a classic. Kafka's scary. He's a classic. And that can be very intimidating. And the writing style can be at times. I don't know if you can see how long some of these paragraphs are, where that's just like, yeah, look how long this is. I personally am not a huge fan of that writing style, but it didn't take away too much since this is a short story. It didn't take away too much for me. But yeah, I mean, it was a fine time. It didn't really do a whole lot for me, but I can see why people would like this. But I do have more stories in this collection to read, but obviously that is our title story. So that is all for that. I will be reading The 5 People You Meet in Heaven, but I am going to a hockey thing tonight, not a game, but a yard sale, because I want to buy a hockey stick because I had a hockey stick as a kid. I don't know exactly what happened to it. We're not going to get into that here, but I would like to kind of replace the one that I had as a kid and put it across my bookshelves on the top. I need to see how you hold a hockey stick because I don't want to be whacking people. I would probably do that, and I would probably have fun doing that, but I know you have to behave in public and I'm not going to do that. So I am going to attempt to buy a hockey stick tonight. Season ticket holders have first come, first serve. I'm not a season ticket holder. I'm in my 20s and I'm not paying for that. So I get to come in an hour later. Don't know how long I'm gonna stay because really it's like the mission is to get this stick, maybe talk to some of the players. I don't know. I don't know what the vibe is, and it's at the arena, but I don't know where at the arena. And I honestly thought it started at 6 because that's what it said in the big letters, but then if you look at the lower, it's like that's for season ticket holders. If you're everybody else, you gotta come later because I'm a peasant. So I don't know if it's gonna be like in the concourse, the big where the ice would be, or if it's going to be in like one of the ballrooms, meeting rooms. I don't know where I'm going. But hopefully when some of those season ticket holders are there, I'm just going to text and be like, okay, y'all, where's this thing at? But that being said, the event starts at 7, so that reading sprint for me is going to get cut short. So I'm not going to read as much today. Last night I did finish my ebook, which is The Lily and the Lion. I gave this a 3.25, so definitely not my favorite in the series. Just with all the characters, it was a lot at once. I did like how all the characters are morally ambiguous, big words, and that they're all just morally gray, and that makes them realistic. But if you're somebody who really likes court intrigue, political intrigue in your fantasy or historical books alike, this would be one for you. This is like a grandfather of those genres. Even there's nothing fantastical in this series, but you can see the influence that it did have on high medieval fantasy books like the A Song of Ice and Fire series. That's why I originally picked up this series, is because it did inspire George R. R. Martin. If you can't see the blurb up here, it says this is the original Game of Thrones, and it definitely is. You can see where he got influence from. It's like when you read Dune and can just see where George Lucas got inspiration for Star Wars from. Very similar, but I do prefer this series to Dune. If I'm going to be honest with y'all, it might be an unpopular opinion, but I don't think that many people in an English speaking audience have read this book or read this series. So not my favorite in the series, but you know, gotta get to it to complete the series. I have one more book in the series, but I will be starting a new ebook, and I didn't realize, just like gross. Thankfully, as I said, I'm going to be doing the ebook. I got this at Goodwill back in September 2024. I thought it was gonna be 2025, but it does make sense that it's 2024. And when I bought it, a lady in the line was like, "Oh my gosh, that's one of my favorite series of all time. I love her books." And then find out I went to Somerville in 2025. I did go to Somerville in 2025 and was reading the Wikipedia page for the town, and I always look at the notable people from there. And the author, it says on this that she lives in a historic home near Charleston. Somerville's in the Charleston area, so she is somewhat of a local author. But this is Texas Rich by Fern Michaels. I really like Texas as a setting in books, so that's what drew me to this. It says, why did they have to be like with 60 million copies? Like, I don't care, just tell me what the book's about. But okay. With more than 60 million copies of her books sold worldwide, New York Times bestselling author Fern Michaels writes big, bold, provocative stories of love and heartbreak, drama, and desire that are impossible to put down. Standing out amongst her most treasured works is the breathtaking Texas series. Now for the first time in a new hardcover edition comes Texas Rich, the extraordinary novel that introduces the unforgettable Coleman family and the brilliant heroine who began a powerful American dynasty. So that's all I'm going to read because the description is on the longer side, but that's what I'm going to be starting tonight. Look how pretty that is on the back. Very pretty scene, even if the book was a little dirty. I'm here to do my update on The 5 People You Meet in Heaven. I read 83 pages in here today, getting me to, I think it was 81%. I have 30 some, or more like 40 some pages left of the books. Oh, not that much. This is a book that's very quick to get through, and all of his books are really like that, where it's just very fast paced, but we kind of talked about that yesterday. So let's go to the notes. The first one, we are seeing what Eddie's life was like during the war, which would be World War II. I had some theories about how he got his injury. We're introduced to about his injury pretty early on in the story, but I was just making theories. I'm not going to say what they were because I don't want to take surprise away from y'all. But it seems like all these experiences might have been like near-death encounters, and what made that not happen. And that will really make you look back at your own life and be like, oh my gosh, I wonder what these events were in my own life, or what could be coming in my own life. It's very much a reflective book, and I do like when books do that. With that being said, I feel like I'm supposed to feel a lot more, that I'm supposed to connect a lot more with this story, but a lot of it is very on the nose, being like, this is the lesson, this is it, in big bold letters, like the author doesn't trust us to find it out for ourselves. I wish it was more, what's that word, ambiguous? Yeah, that was the one I tried saying earlier, ambiguous, where it's just more, I wish there was more for us to think about rather than having it preached out for us, being like, this is exactly what it was. Now, this was his debut fiction book. I do think, obviously, that's something through trial and error that an author can learn to, because I can really see it for somebody who's writing their first fiction book. They're like, I really want to get my point across. And I'm somebody like that, not even with fiction, just with talking. I'm like, I want to make sure that they understand exactly what I'm trying to say. But sometimes we don't need that. Sometimes I think art needs to be left up to interpretation. I do think books are art, but it's up to the author at the end of the day. But how I think this book ends, I think it's going to end with, we're going to go all the way back to page 1, essentially, to that freak accident that Eddie is a part of. I don't want to say anything else, but I think it's going to jump back to that. And it's just really showing how no relationship is perfect, and we are all just living life for the first time. This one, I thought that is something thought-provoking. We move through places every day that would never have been if not for those who came before us. Our workplaces where we spend so much time, we often think they began with our arrival, and that's not true. And I think a lot of us do just, we're like, the story began when I got here. The party don't start till I walk in. Tick tock on the clock. Okay, sorry. But that is something that I preach about history so much, and why I love history, because we wouldn't be in this moment without all the stuff in world history. We would not be right here where we are if it was not for that. Mind-blowing. I know, it's crazy. And then my last one, this is just so emotional. So this person, who is one of the people he meets, opens a diner in, I guess, heaven. I guess we can say it's in heaven. And it is basically where she's taken all these people who could have possibly been hurt by something that is of her creation and holding them tight, making sure they feel warm, they're well fed, and they feel welcomed. And that just kind of, it made me kind of emotional. I will admit it made me kind of emotional. So that is all for the people we meet in heaven for the day. I know that wasn't a lot. It's not one of those books that is giving me a lot with notes. I have like, I was writing on theories, I was writing on personal things in my annotations. So those are things that I can't really read in the vlog, but I did want to just address all that. So I am leaving my house in less than 20 minutes. So I need to get dressed and brush my hair a little bit. I'm gonna brush my teeth too. And hopefully I'm going to go buy a hockey stick. So I'm further than here. I saw some of my friends and I got a Knit Gullah stick. It's really hard to show this on camera, but it is signed. So I don't know if this is game used or what, because it does feel sticky. It's gonna go on my bookshelf. So he's left-handed. That's something that was kind of rare about the Ice Cats, is that a lot of the players, I don't know by the end of the season, but at the start of the season, a lot of them were left-handed, which you don't see that often. Not many lefties on the team. So it is kind of weird to hold. And Fred is smelling his stick. He's a puck. No, he looks like a puck. But I'm going to put this on top of my bookshelf. I did want to show y'all the stick first. This was like $100 and something. But I wanted a hockey stick because I told y'all earlier, and I told somebody there, that I used to have a stick. It got lost. So I'm glad to have a stick for my sports collection. I do have other sports memorabilia on my bookshelves. If you look at my videos, I have a piece of the floor of when the Gamecocks last won a March Madness championship, the women's team. So I do have part of the floor. That's like a prized possession of mine. So we're adding a hockey stick to my sports collection. I just finished Burr. Guys, when I was reading and writing my notes for my review, this Black Hawk helicopter was just circling at 900 feet training. That's what happens if you live in a state with a ton of military bases. But we haven't had a whole lot of action lately because of the war, and a lot of these people have been over yonder in Europe. But this week I heard a fighter jet yesterday, then we had a Black Hawk helicopter just now. I was kind of nervous, but we're good. So I ended up giving Burr a 3.5. So yes, this is a great book. I love Aaron Burr. He's my favorite founding father until I find somebody else really intriguing and interesting to read about. But right now it's Burr, Aaron Burr. Wild man. I told my dad he's a wild man from New Jersey. So let's start by talking about the character work. I love that this isn't at Burr's point of view. When I first heard about this book, not really reading the back, I thought it would be just Burr's life story. You know, you read books by Alison Weir, Philippa Gregory, where you will have a figure in English history and it's going to be at their point of view from their birth until their death. That is not the case here. And we are meeting Burr as an old man. He is in his 70s. He's done a lot of his crazy exploits that he's known for. And now we're seeing him as an old man who has to sit there and deal with the consequences of his actions. But the thing is, it's not at his POV. Our main POV here is Charlie, who is a writer, and he is trying to get the biography written of Aaron Burr, which is kind of cool because this is like a historical fiction biography on Aaron Burr, but we're also seeing a biography be written on Aaron Burr, kind of breaking the fourth wall there. Confusing to say. But we are like unraveling an onion of this villainous, infamous American legend. Aaron Burr is not viewed kindly by American history, and we're just really just unraveling him and trying to get an understanding of why he did these things that he did that made him a traitor. And it's just so crazy to think about a politician, if they did the stuff that Aaron Burr did back then, what would the reaction be today? And that has me, since 2016 and onward, you really have no idea what the consequences of somebody's actions are going to be in politics, because sometimes there's just none at all. Sometimes there's the pitchforks and angry mob out. You never know. So it's really interesting just to think of how we remember Aaron Burr, who lived like 180 years ago, versus how, like, knowing the people who are in power now, how are they going to be viewed in 200 years from now. I do think this book does a great job at portraying these historical figures. Now, I have not read a nonfiction on every single one of these characters in this book, because we have some who are maybe prostitutes and madams at brothels who were based and were real historical figures. But for like Aaron Burr and Theodosia and just a few other historical figures like George Washington that we see in this book, who I have read nonfiction books on, I do think Gore Vidal did a fantastic job at portraying them and bringing them to life, knowing what we know about them historically and making them into these characters, fleshing them out as a people. But I didn't feel a connection to Charlie. As I said, Charlie is our POV that we are following, but I don't think it's really the point to have a connection with him. So I do think overall the character work was great, but I can't give it a full 5-star since I didn't feel that personal connection to our character. But let's talk about the atmosphere. If you are a New York City person, this is for you. Like, I think of The Alienist by Caleb Carr. The settings are very similar. Now, they're obviously taking place decades apart, but just building that city. It's a city that we all, like, if you're not familiar with New York City, what are you doing? To me, that is the capital of the world. That is the capital of Western civilization. New York is New York. It's cool. And we are just seeing New York come to life. You had this older generation of Burr. As I said, he's an elderly man who is basically a native New Yorker. As I said, he's from New Jersey, but he's spent the majority of his life in New York. And then we had Charlie's generation, who Charlie is like my age, like he's in his 20s or 30s. And so we're seeing New York from his perspective and just seeing how New York has changed. But also we're seeing how America is, like, between the age of the American Revolution and the American Civil War, what all adjusting to be in a country. And then I was just so amazed by seeing this build up to the Civil War. We're still decades out, but seeing everything that leads to that, because obviously us reading this book, we know what's coming. We know the Civil War is going to happen. We know why it happens and the results of that war. We know all that, but the characters don't. But we're just seeing it playing out with these abolitionists and anti-abolitionists, sorry, that's a lot of A's, those groups butting heads, and how these elections, how they fall, and how those elections are why we got to where we got to. I really think that is fantastic, just seeing America in that time period, because it's really a time period that we don't discuss that much. It really makes me think, oh, not a lot must have been happening. We talked about this with a nonfiction book, that it's more, we like times of chaos, which we do have wars going on, like the War of 1812 happened in that time period. But there's this moments of peace aren't really discussed that much in history, like classes and that kind of thing. But okay, let's talk about the writing, because the classes does fall into that. So this is dense. This is very dense. The audiobook is 21 hours. And with the audiobook, I do think that kind of slowed me down, because the narrator is a bit slower. And yes, you can speed it up, but there's just so much information that I didn't want to miss out on anything. So it does take a little while to get through. There's a lot of info dumping. There's a lot of political jargon. So I'm going to say my ignorance on this, because my American government and history classes, it was just a very convoluted time, because I did switch schools in the middle of an American history class. There was a lot of confusion in that for me. I don't want to go too much into all that kind of stuff right here during my review, but that is just to say that with this early American political parties and factions, I am not that familiar with. So a lot of that did go over my head, and I was getting confused with that. But I do want to say that there is a lot of history being thrown at you. And as I keep saying, as I said, but I have read on Aaron Burr previously in a nonfiction manner, so I did know a lot. But again, we are, I think history, just historical fiction, we do embellish things and make things a little more entertaining. But with Aaron Burr, I don't think you need to do too much for that, and I don't think the author did. So just know there's a lot of info dumping here. Let's talk about the plot, but we're just seeing American history through one person, through Aaron Burr, because he was just at so many iconic, pivotal moments in American history, just all these people that he knew, because he is a founding father. So obviously he came across a lot of people, and during those early days, he was very much an outcast being from New Jersey. He wasn't a part of the high Virginian society like George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, James Madison, so he was kind of, you know, an outcast and frowned upon. He wasn't one of them, but also he looked down at the likes of George Washington, who was just a land surveyor from Virginia, because Burr's like, I'm the one who, there was another character where one was involved with military and one was involved with politics, but they got in two separate paths, like opposites. That's kind of confusing to say, but a lot of people look down at Washington because he was a land surveyor. He didn't have a background in politics. And it's just kind of funny comparing this to where American history is right now. And even in the afterword, Richard Nixon is mentioned because this was published back during the Nixon era. So comparing that, there's so many variables here, and that's just so interesting to think about. But I love how we're just seeing history, and it's done in such a clever way of this biography format as we are having Burr recount his life to Charlie. Let's talk about intrigue, logic, all that kind of stuff. Now, the plot twists, they kept coming. Even if you know history, there's going to be a lot of more a drama involved, as we do have like fictional characters like Charlie. But however, that last plot twist has me questioning some things, of wanting a little bit more. So I would have liked a little bit more there, but overall I did enjoy my time reading Burr by Gore Vidal. That's my review, a 3.5. So my next mood read is going to be Perfect Tunes by Emily Gold. I'm not going to tell y'all what this is about right now because we have been here nearly 10 minutes, but this is another New York City book. So New York, that's a vibe. This isn't like a hint that I'm going there or anything. That's not happening. But I did want to update y'all on my thoughts, and I do plan on continuing this series. Obviously I give this a 3.5, which will go in as a 4-star. And something that this wasn't on purpose, but we are at the, what is it called? It's not a bicentennial, it's because it's a 250. I don't remember what it's called, but it's like the 250th anniversary of the United States this year. So this Narrative of Empire is a great series to be reading right now, as we are at the 250th birthday of the United States. Happened this Wednesday afternoon. It doesn't feel like Wednesday, it feels like Thursday. But I have already gone to the store. The only thing I have to show you, I got some facial toner. But I did finish The 5 People You Meet in Heaven, so I'm going to go over my thoughts. I'm giving this a 3.5. I'm opening up to where my notes are. As you can see, I wrote like a whole little review in here. That's something fun when you're annotating a book. You can do that. But, oh my gosh, this picture, it's just... Let's talk about the book though. Starting with the characters, I am just left wanting a deeper connection, because I can see that our character of Eddie is very developed, and I just want to feel more towards him. I want to feel more of a connection, so that almost makes me feel like this isn't a character-driven book, because I am lacking that connection. There is development, and I understand who he is as a person, but I just would have liked a little bit more out of my time reading this book. And then for the atmosphere, very I don't want to say beautiful, but the descriptions are great. It does a really good job at making you use your senses. It makes each experience that the character Eddie that he goes through all unique, because each one is just so vastly different and so creative to see how the author did this and was able to wrap all of that together. With the writing, it's very thought-provoking, very reflective. It is very fast-paced, so I always get super scared with fast-paced books, because I'm like, am I absorbing everything that I'm meant to absorb? Am I getting everything that I can get out of this book? So when a book is super fast-paced, this book is only 196 pages. I am just only so scared that I'm not getting everything that I can get out of a book if the author's just going to go very surface level over everything. But speaking of the writing, it goes into the plot. There are several lessons. I think it's 4 or 5 lessons that are like the big ones, and obviously you can learn other things just being a reader of a book. And it felt very preachy, like nothing was up to my interpretation as a reader. And I think that's one of my favorite parts of reading is everybody gets something different out of a book, but it's like the author, Mitch Albom, doesn't trust us that he has this blueprint that he's writing. He's like, this is what you're supposed to get out of it. I'm not gonna leave anything being ambiguous. That's been our word this week, that I just feel like I should have got more out of it, but I didn't have really that time to think and to process things on my own because the author was just putting it on a plate right in front of me. With the intrigue, I did predict major plot points, but it was satisfying, but there were still plot twists that I was like, oh my gosh, where it felt like a horror movie. Like the last section of this book, let's say the last 10 to 20 pages, it felt like a horror movie. I did not know what was going to happen. No, I would have loved to feel that way the whole book, but I really only felt that towards the end. But yes, everything all made sense. It was just like once you get to that last part, it's like, oh my gosh, it makes perfect sense of why we went in the order that we did, why everything comes together the way that it comes together. So overall, I do think this was a good book, even a great book, because it is a 3.5. And I do think there is a lot. I think this book is one that will stick with you. I did finish it about an hour ago, but I do think it's going to be one that I'm going to think back to and being like, I really need to revisit this book. I think this would be a great book to revisit at different stages in your life. It is very fast paced, and that scares me about the sticking power that this book could have. But yes, I would recommend this book because I do think there is knowledge that people can take away from this book, and I do think it's a very wise book. This is where it gets kind of conflicting. It's like, what book do I start first? So we'll be going into the 6 o'clock reading sprint. It's currently like 5:20 or something right now because I just got done writing my review, doing my reading journal. I still have more stuff to do in my reading journal. When am I not working on my reading journal is the real question. But I have the next book on my TBR, which is The Details by Ia Ginberg. This is a piece of translated fiction coming to us from Sweden. I'm thinking of Zara Larsson, is that her name now? But okay, besides the point. So this is my next TBR pick, which I will be doing the audiobook for. This is actually the one I voted for the book club to do. But I also already... Okay, so then we have my mood read. I could start my mood read and save this for the weekend or save this for next week's vlog, because the only reason why I'm like, why I shouldn't start it right now is because you're not going to get that much info on it in this vlog. I will finish it when I'm not vlogging. So that's why I think, yeah, we're going to do this. We're going to read Perfect Tunes by Emily Gold, which is my mood read. I already own the audiobook for, so I don't have to go on the quest to find this audiobook. Let's see what this one is about. As I said, this is going to be a mood read. It's the early days of the new millennium, and Laura has arrived in New York City's East Village in hopes of recording her first album. A songwriter with a one-of-a-kind talent, she's just beginning to book gigs with her beautiful best friend when Laura falls hard for a troubled, magnetic musician whose star is on the rise. Their time together is stormy and short-lived, but will reverberate for the rest of Laura's life. Years later, Laura's teenage daughter is asking questions about her father, questions that Laura does not want to answer. Laura has built a stable life in Brooklyn and closed the door on what was and what might have been, but neither her best friend, now a famous musician who relies on Laura's songwriting skills, nor her depressed and searching daughter will let her give up on her dreams. Funny, wise, and tender-hearted, Perfect Tunes explores the fault lines in our most important relationships and asks whether dreams deferred can ever be reclaimed. It is a powerful tale of music and motherhood, ambition and compromise, of life in all its dissonance and harmony. Music is the main reason I picked this up, and the 2000s, I am always after that 2000s nostalgia of my childhood and New York City. We talked about New York last night, but the New York in like the 90s, 2000s in movies, I love it. So this hopefully will give us that same kind of vibe. And Stories of Motherhood, they're always great. I don't want to say always great because there's probably some bad books out there and y'all can go watch my videos and be like, well, this is one that was bad. So this is the one that I am going to start. As I said, I will be doing the audiobook for it. I have a few notes to share in Perfect Tunes. I got to 27%, which was 67 pages read. That was all one chapter. On the audiobook, they do split that up. But yeah, one chapter, over 50 pages. Crazy. So what is going on right now? We are basically having the groupies, is what they're called. It was kind of a joke of how they got their name, but that is Laura's band performing their first like opening act, their first arena show ever. As I said, opening act, they're not the headliners, and it was just very sudden how all of this was put together. I'm really curious when we're going to get the part about motherhood, because I was just picturing alternating chapters between past and present, past and present. That's how I thought it would go, but so far we're just in the 2000s this whole time so far. But this is definitely long-winded descriptive writing where it's like, do we need all these details to tell this? No, like the way a blunt was described, let me tell y'all, they were probably there now, unloading, sitting backstage, and passing one of the ludicrously, yeah, oversized blunts that Dylan rolled. Like, why do we need such a big word describing how a blunt was rolled? Like, I don't care. Like, why do we need these details? It's like there has to be a word limit. So it is a bit wordy, and I'm not there for that. I don't like that. But luckily I am doing the audiobook, so it's going better for me. But if I was reading this physically without the audiobook, I would be frustrated. My next one is that this character work of Laura is very relatable if you have been a young person before trying to find yourself. I only say I think everybody is just trying to find themselves in lives or in life, how we kind of talked about with the 5 people you meet in heaven. We're just trying to find our purpose and be like, what are we here for? What am I here to do? But we have Laura, who has graduated from, it's so weird just saying Ohio State, and that's how it sounds in the audiobook. I'm like, it's the Ohio State. So she's graduated from there. She's moved to the city to pursue a career in music. Obviously, it's not like you just show up in the city and get a record deal. No, she starts working at kind of a sketchy bar as a hostess. But she is trying to fake it till you make it is one way I would describe it. But she is kind of like, she's like, I don't care what people think of me. I'm going to do my own thing. But really, she does care. And I think that's something for me personally that I can really relate to. I don't know if a lot of people can relate to that, but I would think a lot of people can relate to that. So I have found her relatable, and I do like her. I like the characters here, and they all have their defining qualities and whatnot. But I'm really just having a fun time. It's kind of campy, kind of like, it's very slight by me saying campy, but I'm having a fun time. And that is something that in the little section that I just read, and like the last 20 pages that I just read, we have our character, so she's trying to prove to her boyfriend who is in the band and he's on tour, he's like a rock star, and she is telling him about her music, and he's like, yeah, that'd be good to busk on the subway, like not taking it too seriously. But she's like, this is what I want to do in my life. I want to be a musician. I want to be doing what you're doing. I want people to be moved by my music, and I want my music to be heard. I want to put art out there. And she has all these creative ideas. And that's the thing with this book where I'm like, this is fun. It's a fun weekend read if you're on vacation, beach read, whatever. But that makes it seem like I'm saying this book's not serious. Because, I mean, obviously we are seeing a young woman who is striving and trying to make her dreams a reality. But it's a fun time. So it's just kind of hard to go into that. Being like, I don't want to say this is just a silly fun time, like just read over the weekend and probably forget about it. No, because I am having fun with it. I am enjoying this. I mean, look how much I read. Like, that flew by reading 67 pages. So I am really enjoying this. But it's not, like, it doesn't feel that deep. But I don't want to say it's not. So that's complicated. But that's my first quarter thoughts. I am enjoying it. So that's always a good thing. It is time to wrap up the vlog. So I did get to 53% into Perfect Tunes. We'll be finishing this in next week's vlog, but I will go over the notes that I took today. Is that this is taking place at the start of the millennium in New York City. So obviously, what do you think of when you think of that? You think of 9/11, and they just like never say the word. And I don't really like how 9/11 was handled in this. That might just be because that's one of my personal topics where I consume a lot of media on, historical event that I consume a lot of media on. But I do think this is realistic to show that even when a big traumatic historical event is happening, other people, the everyday citizens, are still going through life and going through the things that life throws at you. And this as a young person, your relationships with friends and family and romantic partners, that your job, all of that stuff is still going on. So it is interesting to see how you might feel really like your problems are minuscule when a big event is happening. And I even think during COVID, some of us probably felt that way. And just where it's like, oh, I can't complain about my problems when these people are going through something so much worse. Where I do, now that I sit here and talk about it more, I do think that that depiction is done in an interesting way. But just this can go into the tone. Just some of the tone, it feels kind of bratty. Our character of Lara, even just how she talks about her daughter, because we are now, we've jumped ahead and we are seeing her life as a mother and how difficult it is being a mother, being a single mother. And in an America that's going towards the recession, no, I just thought about that. I'm like, oh my gosh, it's gonna be bad for her. Maybe we'll have to see where it goes. But yeah, just some of the things she says and just the way it comes off as bratty at times, and I'm not really liking that. So that, because I was really enjoying her as a character, but now I'm like, it would be like a 4 out of 5 for characters, because I do really like following her. I think she's relatable, but at times there'll just be certain instances where I'm like, don't know how I feel about that. But with that first quarter of the book where we're building the relationship with Dylan, it's very sex heavy. And with this relationship, I'm wondering if we're meant to read it how I read it or we're not, because this is very young people right out of college. I don't know exactly how old, like I think they're like 21, so right out of college. And I just don't feel this connection. But I'm like, is it because it's young, love, lust, all of that, that we're not supposed to feel a connection because it's not really there? I don't know, but I'm gonna tell y'all, there is a lot of sex. And sometimes it's fine in a book, like the Pisces. Fine with that, but in this, I'm like, I don't care about this guy's penis. Like, can you stop? Like, with all these descriptions of it, like, sorry for my family watching, but yeah, I'm like, I don't care. And for this relationship, you can just say we had sex. You don't have to go into detail every single time. But the author, that if you like this author, you might want to try this book, or vice versa. I'm getting kind of Ellen Hilderbrand vibes. Now, this isn't as... Ellen Hilderbrand is like a great auto-buy author for me, like 5-star author. This is not 5-star quality. As I said, I am really enjoying it, so it's high 3-star, 4-star vibes. But the Ellen Hilderbrand vibes are definitely there. And we do have some actions that do get repetitive reading. I understand that is how life works. We go through the notions in life. That is just life. But there's just some things where I'm like, okay, I don't need to read this. Because as I said, I understand in life we go through the same things over and over, but reading it, it's like, we don't need to read this many times. You can have it there once. And let's go into the weekly wrap up. So next week's vlog, I'm actually not sure what our theme's going to be. The theme, we're gonna time my reading. We're gonna see how long, like how many hours I read a week. That's what we're going to be doing next week. I think it's going to be our first time in 2026 doing that challenge. So that's going to be super fun. Let's do the weekly wrap up as well. I have completed over 100 pages every day this week, and I do think I will be able to do that today. I will put it on the screen how many pages I get to. But yes, that is definitely doable. I have completed 3 books this week, so I am very proud of myself, because that's one more than last week. And last week there was even a day that I didn't read at all. So to read over 100 pages every day this week, I'm really proud of myself for that. But I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you made it all the way through, leave a flower emoji in the comments below. And as always, comment, rate, and subscribe. And don't forget to ring that notification bell to be notified when all my videos go live. I'll see you in my next one. Bye. Penny.